This is Brian Giunta, and you're watching Moneyball.
That is tagged inside the line. There's a hit by Muni with some help from Don Foos.
Welcome to the Moneyball channel. I am more than excited today to have Mr. Craig Muni on my show, a 16-year NHL veteran, drafted 25th overall, 1980.
Way long ago.
Doesn't that seem like, it's 1980 and I was 2, right? Which I'm 46, so, I'm getting up there as well. And you still look pretty good. You look like a young man. We don't even have to ask how old you are, but drafted in 1980. Does that seem, when you hear that out loud, does that seem crazy?
It seems so long ago. When you start looking back and you start putting dates to things now, coincidentally, that 1980 draft was the first year of the NHL draft, drafting 18-year-old hockey players.
Was it really?
So, yeah, 1970 used to be the draft. You had to be 20 years old to be drafted.
Okay.
The following year, Tom McCarthy, I believe he was 19, was going to sue the NHL for denying him a right to make a living. So that summer, they changed the draft year to 19-year-olds. So basically, your second year junior. So I went into my first year of junior at just not quite 18 yet. And then halfway through that season, they dropped the draft year to 18-year-olds. So halfway through the season, scouts and agents are all coming out of the woodwork, fast and furious. So it was kind of an interesting time.
It always blows my mind. I had Danny on recently, and he spoke extremely highly of you, and that's how you and I got linked up. And it always blows my mind how sharp you guys are. And I don't mean that in a fashion of, the playing. You guys know the details, right? Like Danny was saying, he said the day I had him on was actually the 5th anniversary of him scoring his goal 18 seconds in to still holds the record as the fastest rookie ever, number 18 seconds in, and then the story. But he the way he told it, Craig, it was like it happened yesterday.
Yeah. It's crazy how some things are still fresh in your mind, even though they were decades ago now.
Right.
Yeah. Funny you said that particular goal. I just saw tickets not long ago, and he reminded me of that goal. Him and Don Luce reminded me of that goal because they were together.
Yeah, well, I think did you see him in Buffalo? Was it at the game?
Yeah, at one of the Sabre games.
Okay, yeah. So Tickets was doing a lot of bragging that day. I ran into a couple other guys that saw him that day, and they all told me the story because I had mentioned that's the day I had him on, and everybody who saw him that day said, "Oh yeah, we got to relive his fastest goal as a rookie ever."
Coincidentally, I played with Tickets in Edmonton, which was my first year out there.
Yeah,
and he loves to tell the story at golf tournaments when he's talking, and I happened to be there on an introduction that he assisted on my first NHL goal as well.
He's got to let the people know, right?
Yeah, you're a great guy. So that was really my first year in the NHL. That was ended up being basically his last year in the NHL.
Yeah, injuries kind of cut him short, and to play as long as you did, and you were kind of known as a defensive specialist, right? That's what I think, and you have the 3 Stanley Cups with the Edmonton Oilers, which is just an amazing feat on its own. And I think sometimes defensemen, especially defensive defensemen, don't necessarily get the credit, right? Because you're not in the column. You're not in the G or the A column. You were certainly in the penalty minute column and the plus minus column, right? And I know that, I have kids that play hockey, and I'm very involved with youth in travel hockey and things of that nature. And it's all about stats with them, right? And do you feel hockey, was it the same back then, as it is now? Do you think the kids are now, is it just all about kind of that glory? Was it the same vibe back then? Give me kind of an idea of how it was then.
Yeah. Obviously, the game's changed a lot over the last probably decade plus now. It is all about the speed and the skill, and that's what the NHL and minor hockey try to display, try to teach the kids at an earlier age, working on the skating, the edges, the skill work.
Yep.
So that has changed immensely, where previously, like in my draft of 1980, was kind of the tail end of the bad Philly, Broadway, both.
Oh, yeah.
Big Bad Bruin.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Size was really the biggest thing back in the day. So at the time, if you weren't a big guy, you weren't being drafted at all. Where now it's changed that if you can skate and you have skill, doesn't matter what your size is. The only bad thing I see with that philosophy is when the playoffs come around, the rules change. Yeah. And the playoff hockey is more like hockey in our era, not as nasty, but it's a little bit more clutching and grabbing. There's a lot more hitting, intimidation.
Better hockey, to be honest. It's better hockey.
So when I did scout for 5 years, and at the time I was working for Rick Dudley, who was the GM in Tampa and then Florida for a year. Duds loved the skilled players ahead of the rule changes that were coming about. And I'd always remind them that, again, are we here to win the President's Trophy, or are we here to win the Stanley Cup?
I love
It's
that.
a fine line, because if I had a guy that was 5'10", a guy that's 6'1", and everything being equal, skill, speed, everything was the same, I'm taking the bigger guy for the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because he's going to come out of the corner. He's going to have a little bit more longevity of a career. So it's kind of a fine line, and that's kind of makes you wonder sometimes when a team, pick any team that continuously draft the small players.
It's really interesting to hear you say that. And it's not just the NHL really in that regard. You know, I mean, there's several sports that I feel now the game changes tremendously in the playoffs. I mean, baseball, we're a huge baseball family. And if you could literally go through 162 games and then you could just watch the baseball playoffs and you see completely different teams, right? It's whoever got hot, and then it's just all about the pitching, right? And so, not to lean into baseball, but there is some similarities there. And I totally agree with you with hockey. And I think the playoff hockey, I have people I know that don't watch all year, and they say, I can't wait, it's hockey playoff time, and it's their favorite sport. Craig, I'm talking, it's their favorite sport, but they don't even watch it during the season.
Yeah. You playoff hockey, you could watch any team play.
Any team.
You know you're going to get a good game no matter what, and a competitive game.
I always like watching the West Coast. You know, I do stay up. It's getting a little tougher for me to stay up now. You know, those West Coast games, say you got even, like a Calgary or something playing in the playoffs. Those Canadian old school, I call them old school teams, Winnipeg, who's tremendous, starting tremendously, and Calgary, seems to me they're still drafting size. You know, there's some of those old school, methods to a lot of those scouts. If you look at a team, even the Buffalo Sabres, for example, right? We're not drafting size, right? We're drafting skill players. I remember, sorry, Casey Middlestat, no offense, but the guy couldn't get up one pull-up, remember? I mean, not even one. There's pictures of that poor guy forever that'll never live it down.
It'll follow him around forever.
And he couldn't get up one pull-up, and it's like, you got to have a combination of both. Now, listen, he is talented. He's an NHL talent player, right? So, I mean, listen, if my son never makes it to any type of level, who cares? You can throw the pull-ups out the window. But to be successful and to have a career like Craig Muni with 3 Stanley Cup, championships, I think you're going to need to have some of that size. And I see the game kind of shifting. So, everything goes in cycles. I see it shifting a little bit slowly, but shifting a little bit back toward that. There's been more fights this season than I've seen to open, the first 15 games of the season than I've seen in probably 10 years. 15 years, right? I mean, the Sabres are fighting. There's teams. What is your take on fighting in the NHL?
I understand why they're taking it out, and the reason with everything, all the sports across the board, it's all about concussions and how to prevent them and how to look after your players and safety. I don't think it should be like people talk about a stage fight where the 2 tough guys just go out and fight. But the thing that bothers me the most with the hockey now and the fighting is if a guy throws a clean hit. I think Dali just threw one the other day, and it's like 5 guys have to come after him. It's like, you know what? It's hockey. Keep your damn head up. You won't get hit.
Thank you.
It's like, till they take hitting out of the game, there's going to be a guy that's going to come across the middle of the ice when the guy's got his head down.
Such a great point.
Well, to me, I would rather hit a guy and knock him out of the game than score a goal. But again, I was basically like football on ice, and it's not to that point, but especially come playoff time, you have your head down and the guy has an opportunity to knock the best player out of the game or the series. Yep. I'd say 99% of the time he's going to take that opportunity.
I love you saying that because you were kind of known for clean hits. There's guys that are notoriously known for dirty hits, right? And I was a fanatic when I was a kid, and growing up I'm an '80s kid, right?
Yeah.
And I remember watching you on those Edmonton teams. I really do. There were guys then, even a couple. Kevin McGuire was a former Sabre. There was a couple. They were just kind of notorious for kind of dirty hitting, and you were always doing it the right way. And I would say that to you, whether you were standing in the room or whether you weren't in front of me. Because you always seem to. There is a big difference there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because everybody who plays professional sport, they were always good athletes as kids. They were good at their particular sport they played at to be one of their top players on whatever team they happen to be on. But when you get to the pro level, and I can only speak of hockey because of doing it, a good example of that is like a Guy Carbonneau, or even you take locally a Rob Ray. Like those guys, when they played minor hockey and junior hockey, they weren't fighters.
They were goal scorers.
Yeah, or Guy Carbonneau playing in the Quebec League, it's all about scoring goals. It always has been and always will be. Rob Ray probably didn't start getting into fighting until maybe later in junior, or when he turned pro. But you have to.
Craig, I had Rob on the show, not to interrupt you, and he told me, his goal or his job on his teams was to score goals. He was like their elite goal scorer. You're absolutely right.
He would have been a power forward in the day.
Yeah.
And every team had 2 or 3 power forwards, because if you didn't, you weren't winning anything. But when you get to the pro level, you really have to look at yourself and the team that drafts you. And like when I went to Edmonton, and I was playing there a few years and won a few Stanley Cups, we had some guys come out of junior that were 60, 70 goal scorers in junior. David Haas, Sean Van Allen, and Dan Curry. And they were all talented kids. Whenever they came up to Edmonton, it just happened to be they were centermen, and our centermen were Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, Craig McTavish.
Right. Yeah, good luck breaking into that lineup.
Yeah, they're never going to play. So every time one of these kids came up, I would sit them aside and kind of tell them, it's not that you aren't good enough to play. You just are in the wrong organization at the wrong time. If you get a chance to get out, you have to, because you'll never play here.
Yep.
So, but the team's not going to say that, because they'll always say we're going to draft the best available player instead of the best available player that will help our team in 2 years or 5 years, whatever it might be. And I think that's a grave mistake that teams make by drafting that way.
I love what you just said, man. Those 3 guys that you mentioned, and I consider myself, a bit of an oracle with hockey. I never heard of any of them. I swear to God. And that, that being said, did they end up getting out of Edmonton? Did they go and have it?
They all did, yeah. Sean Van Allen, out of the 3, had the longer NHL career. He ended up in Ottawa once expansion came, and he played a number of years in Ottawa.
Okay.
I think Haas or Curry, one of them went to LA, played a little bit. But again, and I saw this kind of at the same time, because Craig Simpson, who I played with in Edmonton, was a great player.
Yep.
But I played against his brother, Dave.
Winger. He was a winger, right?
He was a winger, yeah.
Yep.
But he was a high first-round draft pick, and I played with. So he came from Pittsburgh to Edmonton in a big trade, and I played against his older brother, Dave Simpson, who played for the London Knights, and he was drafted in the first round to the Islanders, and he got stuck in the same position following the Islanders dynasty, and he was never going to play center. He ended up quitting instead of trying to go somewhere else. But if you get stuck in that situation and you know you're not going to be a centerman there, how am I going to make this team?
Right.
Am I going to be a fighter? Am I going to be a defensive specialist? And that's what you have to figure out yourself, or with help of other teammates, or maybe the organization, or a coach, or your agent, or your parents.
Such a good point. Speaking on that, you need to be sort of a chameleon, right? In sorts.
Yeah.
Did you do that? Did you change your game style when you were drafted?
Yeah, I guess growing up as a kid and playing junior, I always look back at it now. To me, I was never the best player. Like you look at a minor hockey
too. You're a bigger.
I was always a bigger kid, always one of the bigger kids on the team. But you go to a game or you talk to parents and they say, well, little Johnny, he's for sure going to make the NHL, blah, blah, blah. And you heard that about so many kids growing up, who, by the way, never played junior hockey or college hockey. So I was never the best player or a big goal scorer, but I put up decent numbers as a kid. I think in junior I had 30-something points in 70, 80 games.
Mm-hmm.
But then I started. So my first year of junior, I played in Kingston. And at the time, your first year junior, you're supposed to just sit, watch the veterans play, learn. And the first year is kind of that process. I was, I guess, lucky enough that when I went to Kingston, there was only 2 returning vets, and one of them got hurt for season-ending injury. So they had no choice but to play us rookie defensemen. So there's myself, Rick Wilson, Mike Stuthers, Jim Aldred, that played from day one. And I got put with Rick Wilson, who was Kingston's first-round pick, who ended up being the following year a first-round pick to the Blues.
Okay.
But we worked and talked that if a guy was coming down on me, I would take away the wall and I would force him to come across the middle of the ice. And Rick would come across and meet him.
Yep.
And he did the same thing.
Okay.
So he was better offensively, but we worked in tandem defensively to get the big hits.
And you communicated out on the ice, right?
Yeah. So as soon as I saw a guy coming down on him, I would start cheating towards the middle so I could come across from the guy.
I love hearing this.
So again,
there is strategy to hockey. You don't just grab a stick and go try to skate through the whole team.
No, you force guys into spots they don't want to. Or I'll tell a young defenseman, or when I coached with Rick Sealing with we coached the Buttes, the girls team, and I always told the defenseman I work with, there's not a player that I've ever played with or against that can shoot a puck better on their backhand than their forehand.
Yeah.
So whenever they are coming down on you, force them to their backhand. Because if they're going to take a shot, it's not going to be that strong or that powerful of a shot. Your goalie's got a better chance than if you let them go wide to their forehand. So it's just like little things like that.
Something so simple like that, Craig, that is tremendous advice, right? That I think people just don't, like, I'll use that now. Just hearing that, of course they're going to be weaker on their backhand. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
it's common sense.
It's common sense. Let me ask you this. How did Buffalo end up home? Obviously you started in Edmonton or no, you started in Toronto.
Toronto, I was drafted in Toronto. Yeah.
Right. And then, had, I guess, the illustrious career in Edmonton is where you put your stamp on hockey, on NHL hockey. And then, the journeyman process started a little bit later in your career, right? Buffalo. And I think you played for 6 or 7 teams. What ended up being did you meet a girl in Buffalo? What happened?
I'm from Toronto originally.
Okay.
So, I always thought I was going to go back to Canada, specifically Edmonton. When I was done playing, I ended up playing there 7 years. So we had some roots there. Yeah. But then I think about year 2, when I was in the States in Buffalo, kind of decided that we weren't going to do that plan. So my last year I was in Dallas, and my youngest one was about to start kindergarten the following school year. And that was after 16 years. If I was going to play another year, it would have meant moving the whole family. So we kind of decided that let's pick a place where the kids can have a normal life, have friends, and grow up with those friends for life. So we chose Buffalo as our time when we were here.
I love hearing this, man.
It's close to Toronto.
Yep.
The people here are great. The cost of living is good. The school systems are phenomenal. And the school systems, that's from seeing other cities that we were in. So those are a lot of the main reasons we came back and never left.
Puts a big smile on my face to hear that, because you obviously, and that's why I asked that question, because you had choices. You could have went to any one of those cities, not only that you played for, but that you traveled to, and Buffalo caught your heart. How old are your kids, and what are they all up to? Are they Buffalo, or what's the story?
Funny, none of them. I've got 3 kids, and funny, none of them are in Buffalo. So.
Yeah, they might come back.
Yeah. My son's 34. He's in Wellington, Florida. I have a daughter, 32. She's in San Diego, and a 30-year-old daughter who's in Jacksonville, Florida.
What was it like playing with Gretzky in those years in Edmonton, man? I got to ask.
Gretzky makes the game easier, as all superstars should. And I happened to be lucky enough to have play a year with Mario Lemieux as well. So I always get that ask of comparison between the two. So I always use the analogy where, so Wayne has the puck, he likes to gain the blue line, he'll circle back. And if you're up on the rush, usually as a defenseman, I'll go to somewhere to the hash marks. If I don't see the puck, I'll circle back to my spot. Wayne was the only guy, if I was up on the rush, I'd go all the way to the net. And it was uncanny how I can't see him through the crowd anymore of bodies. And I just keep my stick on the ice, and somehow he got the puck on my stick. But he was the only player I ever played with that I would do that. Where Mario was bigger and stronger, he would attack you one-on-one, where he could beat you on the one-on-one because he was shifty for a big guy, but he's also a strong individual. So it was kind of different comparisons, but they were both superstars in their own right.
You know, who I think doesn't get spoken a lot about, Jari Kurri. You know, who was just, I mean, if you want to call him Batman and Robin, he was just tremendous. What can you say about his gameplay?
He was, he was such a smart player. He was a good passer, good shooter. The oddest thing about Jari was his stick. So most guys, the blades are so thick all the way through. His was thin, like he would like playing road hockey for a number of years, and you know how it grinds down on the bottom.
Really?
It becomes a toothpick.
Yeah.
His stick was almost like that, which was unbelievable because I don't know how he would be able to get a shot off without breaking his blade.
Would he grind it down or something?
No, when you pick your pattern, you can pick it any way you want.
Yeah.
Your blade, the stiffness, the handle, then that's how his pattern was. But him and Gretzky were phenomenal together. Well, Yuri's put up so many points. Yeah. I believe even without Gretzky, he still would have been the superstar he was.
Yeah.
But it's like you're playing in that era. I was 24 years old when I first went out there, and you knew how good the team was, but you look back now, it's like that team was full of Hall of Famers, and there was a reason why that team was so good.
I mean, there's one year, and I may not be accurate, but I think Gretzky had 92 and 150 or something, right? It was just, you look at that now, you look at those stats, and no one's going to touch that. No one. I mean, you can, Bedard and all these guys who come up, and they're crazy skilled players, right?
Yeah.
But, a 50-goal season now is a huge accolade. This guy's, I don't know if we'll have, even though Gilney the one year, he had 76 goals, right? And I don't think you're going to see that stuff again,
No. It's funny, kind of what you said there. So the last outdoor game I did with the Oilers, we played in Winnipeg. So it was on TV, and my brother-in-laws, I guess, were watching. My wife told me after the game, she said, granted, Gretzky looked terrible. He'll never look like Wayne Gretzky during his heyday, and he doesn't skate anymore. So she said they made a comment that, Gretzky looked terrible. He would never be able to play in the NHL today. So I told her, I said, tell your brothers.
Yeah, I was going to say, who made that comment?
It was her brother-in-laws, who are hockey guys. They know hockey.
Yeah.
I said, tell your brothers. I said, Gretzky would easily play in the NHL. He'll put up some great numbers. They may not be what he put up in those days.
Right.
But tell them 90% of the guys who play in the NHL today would never even play a game in our era because they would never last.
Listen, you are so absolutely spot on with that. I mean, there's a toughness that, it can never be duplicated. And I know they're hockey guys and they know what they're talking about or whatever, but I would say, you know what? Say that to Wayne's face too, and see what goes on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it wasn't even just the toughness of the fighting. You take that all aside and throw out all the fighting. It's the nastiness of the hits.
Yeah.
Like they talk about hitting from behind, how terrible it is. And to me, it's like when we played, you knew if you're playing against Kasparaitis or Scott Stevens, you knew who you're playing against, what team. You knew everybody on the team and what they do. So you never put yourself in a position to get hurt knowing what those guys would do to you if they had a chance. So they talk about hitting from behind and guys going into the boards. Like we were taught to play close to the boards, and the boards are your friend. where now they're taught to play away from the boards, where they're 3 to 5 feet away from the boards, facing the boards, and the guy's coming to hit them. And when you're coming in at a good speed and you're already moving your body weight towards the hit, and the guy turns, where he turns, now he's directly facing the boards, and he goes head first in the boards, and they yell at the guy for throwing the hit.
Yeah, so you hit him from behind. Yeah.
My philosophy is always, at what point does it become the person who's taking the hit, his responsibility to protect himself versus the guy who's throwing the hit? Because once your momentum is moving forward, you can't stop it no matter which way the guy turns. So at some point, the guys have to learn to play closer to the boards, play 2 feet from the board, so you don't go head first, hit your head on the dasher, cut yourself, knock yourself out. Even in our day, if a guy did that in front of me, I would push his head just into the glass. I would tell him, don't ever do that again.
Almost a warning, like, hey, I could have really crushed you there, but, you're lucky I didn't, right?
Yeah, but it's like, I know they're trying to protect the guys, but at some point, the guys playing have to protect themselves.
Well, I can tell how cerebral you are with the game, and obviously coaching. And you were involved. Would you ever coach again? At a higher level if that opportunity came up?
Yeah, I guess I'm getting on an age that
you're a young.
It's like people ask, why didn't you get involved in coaching earlier or more? And I loved it. I loved coaching my kids and all the sports that they played. I love coaching the Buttes, and I love just helping kids or somebody get better. The problem with the coaching, even when I first retired, there's only so many coaching jobs. You would have had to start at the beginning, work your way up. And after 16 years of doing that, of playing hockey, I wasn't prepared or ready to do that and make my family go through it.
I understand. I'll tell you what, you and I could have another 3-hour conversation on the current state of youth sports and the coaching, which, trust me, I will say this. I think the biggest issue that we're having right now in youth sports is that the coaches, whether their intentions are good or not, don't understand the difference between how you speak to a 10 or 11-year-old and how you speak to a 16, 17-year-old. And they're so impressionable, and everything that you say, you got to understand a 10, 11-year-old's looking up to you. There's their dad, hopefully, and then their coaches, and then NHL stars that are their heroes. Those are the people that they're looking at most, so if you're constantly screaming and yelling at them, they're not going to respond well to that.
And I grew up in that era where coaches yelled and screamed and threatened you and bench you. But you know what? Quick story. So my first year at Edmonton, and early in the season, our first game back at Maple Leaf Gardens against the Leafs, who I just left the organization. I was there 4 years. And first face-off, I started the game. The first face-off's in Toronto's end. We win the draw. I wind up for a shot. I hit Wendell Clark in the shin pads. They go down on a 2-on-1 and score. So I go to the bench, and I'm sitting on the end of the bench, kind of looking over my shoulder. I'm waiting for Glenn Sayer to come down and screaming at me or bench me or say something. He didn't come down. He didn't say a word. And I just went out normally on my regular shift. And then when the period ended, we go in the dressing room, and I see Glenn walking through the door, and he comes right to me. And he just comes right in front of me and says, you know what you did wrong on that first shift? I said, yeah. He said, don't let it happen again. That was it. That was in an era when Keenan and these guys were yelling and screaming and benching players. I'm thinking, they're going to send me to the minors. I'm going to be sitting out the next few games. And this is all going through my head. When I got into
story, thank you so much for sharing that story. That's a story that honestly, like I would want to share with coaches, because you don't have, and I bet you, and I'm sorry if I interrupted you, but I bet you the fact that he handled it that way.
Yeah. Well, I remembered it forever.
It changed your perspective, right? And you were like, wow, and I bet you actually didn't do it again because you accepted the fact that you didn't get screamed at.
Yeah. So I took that into, after playing and then coaching my kids and coaching the Buttes. So at one point, coaching the Buttes, Megan Falzer, who was an Olympian, she came up to me early when I was just first starting. She said, Coach, she said, if you ever get mad, you can yell at us and swear at us. I said, we can take it. So I said, Megan, I'm not going to yell and scream at you, but if I do, you're going to know I'm really pissed.
Yeah. And that was it, right? And that was all you needed to say.
Yeah.
Man, this was a lot of fun. I can't thank you enough for taking some time with me here and sharing some stories. Certainly a salt of the earth guy, as advertised, Craig.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Yeah, greatly appreciate it. Have an amazing day, and thank you. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for having me on. Enjoyed it.